Welcome, everyone, to the 30-minute Midas Touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30-minute Midas Touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Money in the Bank.
Oh,
Mark Tipton.
Money in the Bank. Thank you very much. I appreciate that nickname. One of my favorite matches in WWE. Regardless of who you want to give credit to for the invention of it, I know that's a dispute of some sort, but I always look forward to that match. And particularly, I like the idea of the sudden change. I'm a fan, and all the fans go nuts when you have that sudden change. So, call me Money in the Bank, Mark Tipton. I appreciate that very much. And it does kind of lead into the subject of this week's edition of the 30-minute Midas Touch podcast, because we're going to, like I mentioned, that's one of my favorite things. We're going to look back in this podcast over the last 10 years. Just kind of look back at some of the events, because, change is inevitable, as it is, always. And we're going to look back the last 10 years, look at the changes, positive and in some cases negative, for professional wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may seem like recent history, but a lot of it feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So it's really interesting to see where we've been and kind of maybe where we're going and things like that. And just want to talk about the overall business model and or changes into professional wrestling in the last 10 years.
All right. Well, if you don't mind me just kind of taking the lead here, there's a couple of things that sprang to mind immediately. A couple of things that I wanted to begin our discussion on were more about the business in general. In the last 10 years, saw two things in particular arise. I guess you could say three, arise that were big for me as a professional wrestling fan and observer from a distance, looking at how things are done. The first one I would like to start with is the establishment of the WWE Performance Center, which occurred in 2013. And that, for the WWE, was a big change. It kind of indicated a notion that they wanted to kind of train their homegrown talent, so to speak, and develop their own talent for themselves, which was something they had not really done up to that point to any great degree. They had largely taken talent from other promotions, was a big part of, a lot of people started in other places and then went to New York to make it big, so to speak.
Or they basically subcontracted it out. Like with the OVW stuff, they shipped them to OVW, and then it was OVW's job to train them and get them ready, and
right. Then
they got progress reports and things like that.
But it wasn't really an in-house kind of thing.
And that, and once again, this is when you're the only one left, you get to rewrite history, right? Here we are. We're talking about the Performance Center. Well, the Performance Center is really just a shoot off of the power plant. The WCW power plant. I mean, it was pretty much the same concept, right? 3 rings,
sure.
Up-to-date facility, and where guys can train and work out and get everything ready. It was available. I think it was available for all talent. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. Kind of the same way with the Performance Center. I think that was one of those things that, like I said, WWE took, and they don't really give credit where credit is due on that. But they're going to act like the Performance Center was all their idea and their brainchild. And I understand that they actually credit more like the NFL performance centers and training camps.
Right, modeled it after those.
Modeled that after those. But to me, the beginning of it for me was, that's the first time I'd ever heard of anything like that, was the WCW power plant.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because that had totally left my mind. I guess for some of my... WCW is a sore subject for me. So sometimes I think I try to put some things away, but the power plant was something I should have remembered and used, and it was a very good guide. I seem to recall, was it Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker was heavily involved there?
Yeah, he was. I think he was the head trainer at one point. I mean, there was lots of guys that trained. Obviously, Regal was there quite a bit, and from what I understand, there was quite a few guys there.
It was certainly an idea, but it was just, to me, at least for the WWE, we'll keep it to them, that doing this because my understanding is they had designs, and I understand they do have a performance center in England, I believe.
Yeah, at a smaller scale.
On you certainly, but at one point they had discussed the notion of establishing similar, buildings around the world, so to speak.
Yeah.
In Asia, etc., and so forth, and sort of developing potential WWE talent around the world. And so it seemed rather audacious from my point of view.
I mean, that like I think I mentioned it last week on, or maybe a couple weeks ago on the podcast, that WWE, as much as everyone wants to talk about how they're an international company, they are still a territory. It's just their territory is global, right?
Certainly.
And that's a point for them right there. They were trying to basically do, branches or affiliates or whatever throughout the world, and kind of have a home base for that kind of stuff to, like you said, groom talent and maybe utilize those people on their televisions to introduce their product to different markets and things like that.
And sort of serve as a advertisement for the WWE, even when the main show, so to speak, is not in town. Say they go to the UK, for example, I think twice a year generally. But then they would have a running promotion there, keeping the WWE name current and alive in everyone's mind. So that certainly seemed like a bold idea, and so I appreciate it and thought it was a big event that happened during the last 10 years.
Yeah, one thing that bothers me about WWE and the Performance Center and that is their thought process that they can take anybody and make them a WWE superstar. There's no other professional sport that can say something like that. It's not like the MLB is going around picking guys out of bars and going, okay, you can pitch 90 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
there's a certain skill set to this business to be successful or be good at it. Let me put it that way. And I just don't like the fact that they just, like you said, ostentatious, but also very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it's just that they think that they can just take anyone, and as long as they have their training and their thought process and their this, then in 12 months, they're going to be a WWE superstar.
So that could be the word arrogance?
Arrogance. That was the
Shades of Rick Martel.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I believe that was Rick Martel's.
Yeah,
that was
was missed. We were just talking about that last night, actually.
Little wrestling history there for those of you who remember that.
We were actually talking about Batista, and someone said that nowadays he looked like Rick Martel rather than Batista.
All right. On the business side of things, there was one of the things that stood out to me that started in 2014 that I thought played a big role in WWE and wrestling in general, and that was the establishment of the WWE Network.
Yeah, and this is something that's I love, obviously. Like, I was, me, I've been a tape collector, DVD collector. My goal was to have as much wrestling history, in my possession as humanly possible. And at the time when they announced the network was coming out, I was actually in the process of acquiring every WWE pay-per-view, like on DVD in some form or fashion. And I gotten pretty close. I was getting there, and then they said they were coming out with that, and I was like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose. So I kind of put that on the back burner. I really haven't bought a wrestling DVD in many, many years now, because everything is so readily available,
right,
on streaming services and or the network and things like that.
Well, really, for me, the primary change was the kind of the business model, because it meant, in effect, the end of the pay-per-view as a primary driver of revenue and things
Right.
that they focused on. Because obviously, when you do the $9.99, as they put on flags on top of Titan Towers, $9.99. That's what it was, and the first month is free. So, and they told me that over and over and over again, and it stuck out to me because as someone who routinely purchased WWE pay-per-views, although I guess I had kind of slacked off some shortly before the WWE Network came along. I came a little more selective in when I purchased and when I didn't, just because of the abundance of
Yeah.
them.
And the price point.
And the price point was a concern because it regularly became north of $50. And then when you put on the assorted fees and taxes and,
HD.
yes, all those things bled into it. And so I thought establishing it where, because when I recall leading up to this, my anticipation was that WrestleMania would not be included with the WWE Network. I
Right.
really thought that they would keep it as a separate pay-per-view and allow you to get the others. Maybe Royal Rumble separate. I didn't know about that. But I thought WrestleMania, just because of its, prestige,
Yeah.
would be kept as a separate, traditional pay-per-view event that would cost $70, whatever it was at the time.
Right.
And then when they said WrestleMania was included, it just, I was a first day sign up. It was, I looked up, it was one day in February, it was the day after they had the No Way Out pay per view, whatever that was, that the WWE Network went live the next day. But I was waiting in line. I couldn't, when I knew WrestleMania was a part of the package, I was like, well, this is, no brainer is an understatement.
Yeah, I mean, like my uncle, he's not a wrestling fan at all. You know what I mean? And he had heard about it, and he said, "Yeah, that's a great deal. You should do that. You buy all the pay-per-views anyway, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." And he's like, "Well, that's going to be great for you then." And it actually, the network actually debuted about a month or so before my grandfather passed away, and I actually credited the WWE Network for helping me get through that because I just lost myself in professional wrestling and just all
Sure.
that stuff that was available to me finally. That some of the stuff I hadn't seen before, or maybe stuff I could just readily just at a click of a button go watch some of my
Right.
favorite matches. So
Gave you something, yeah, to focus on. I certainly, to certainly nothing to that extent, have used professional wrestling at, when things are not going well. I can always turn to something like that and focus on that, and just kind of focus on something other than whatever's bothering you at that moment. It's a tremendous value of entertainment in general, but for us, professional wrestling in particular.
yeah. Well, my thing too is like when something bad happens in my life, I would much rather be wrestling.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And like a lot of people, so and so passed away or this happened, and I don't feel like I was like that's the exact opposite of what I do. When something negative happens to me like that, that's the first thing I want to do is because I know that for this 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever we are in the building, then I'm not going to think about whatever it is as much.
Right.
I'm going to be talking about wrestling. I'm going to be thinking about wrestling, and
Well, for me, sometimes professional wrestling is something I understand better. It makes more.
Right.
It understands, but it's like I know how I should act, how I should feel, and I feel at home here when the world gets a little bit rough. Let me just kind of off of that. We've kind of talked about the business impact of the WWE Network. One of the things that stood out to me as a fan was right off the bat they gave us the first NXT takeover, and this was really for me the introduction to NXT. I knew of it. I knew that they had FCW. I believe Steve Kern was a leadership role in FCW, and I knew that they had kind of taken that and turned it into NXT. And I know Triple H took a leading role in that, particularly later on, as it when they kind of reorganized, so to speak. But my first real opportunity to see what was going on, other than reading a report on the internet about what was going on there, was to see that first. And the first takeover. I guess the first one was called Arrival. I don't believe it was actually called Takeover. I think Takeover name came later. The first event I remember I think it was NXT Arrival. I believe.
that sounds about right.
I stand to be corrected on that. I'm going off memory on this one. I did not look this up, so
Right.
I'm doing something dangerous there. But I saw a number of talents in there who were still with us, active in wrestling today. My recollection is that involved Bo Dallas and Neville. I had to think about his WWE name,
Right.
and now known as the Bastard Pack in AEW.
Right.
And who is someone I've always enjoyed watching him work and watching his performances. He stood out to me, and I believe there was a match between Paige and what was the dancing, the name just left my mind. I forgot her WWE name. She's working in Impact Wrestling now, and it will come to me in a moment.
Okay.
But they had a tremendous match that, quite frankly, it was the kind of match I didn't know WWE would allow women to have.
Right.
It really stuck out to me. And so it was really impressive. And so that Arrival pay-per-view, they had me hooked right there.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment on that at all?
Yeah, like I said, the NXT, they rebranded everything from FCW and moved everything from, I think it was from Tampa to Orlando. And that whole thing was, hey, we're going to rebrand this stuff. It's going to be, and we've talked about this before, the developmental, technically it is a developmental territory, but what do you do when your developmental territory is now on national television? So that's kind of been the cross they have to bear now. It's like, the whole point of a developmental territory is to give people television time and television experience under the radar, so when it's time for them to go and make money, they're a valuable asset to do so. Now they really don't have that same kind of avenue to do that with. But like the arrivals and the takeovers and all the things like that, they've produced a lot of really, really good matches. Some matches that obviously I'm not a fan of. I'm not a big fan of Johnny Gargano, or as I like to call him, Johnny Leg Slap.
Okay.
I like some of his stuff, and I think he's got the right idea sometimes, but I think it's so phony and play wrestling sometimes that it bothers me.
Okay, so are you referring to like his matches with Tommaso Ciampa?
Tommaso's another one that's, I think he's good,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, like, he gets injured, every other week, it seems like. He's been champion 2 or 3 times, and each time he's champion, he gets injured and has to relinquish the belt somehow, or something like that happens. So, I mean, like, and it goes back to what I've always said, that you can't do the kind of style that a lot of these guys do. You can't do that full time. You can't do that every night. You can't do that kind of stuff without having serious injury.
Okay. Very quickly, the name did come to me. It was Emma.
Oh, yeah. I remember that match.
She wrestles in Impact Wrestling as Tennille Dashwood now.
Yeah.
It's all about me.
She's amazingly hot.
Yes. A lot of people notice that. But she did the silly little dance to
the
ring.
dance.
But she and Paige had a tremendous match. If any of you have a chance to watch it, I really enjoyed it, and it's something that stuck out to me. And when that name did come to me, I didn't want to get that in. But you bringing up Tommaso Ciampa, that brings something that has been a concern of mine, and I want to give you a chance to talk about this. Do you think that Tommaso Ciampa's injury issues may be a result of at least what in my mind is his clear, determined efforts to kind of, to the best of his ability, fit the WWE mold of what a wrestler should look like? And what I'm particularly getting at is
that he bulked up.
Yes, he made a sincere effort. To me, it was clear that he made a sincere effort to bulk up, get more defined, as the bodybuilders say, and so forth. And do you think that might have resulted in the injuries? Because is that type of body compatible with professional wrestling to a great degree?
So, I mean, it comes down to you personally and what your body type is. Some people can, hold a 260-pound frame. Some people cannot. I'm 5'8". 260 pounds. Whether it's a good 260 or a bad 260, either way is going to be hard on me, regardless. I like to be, more like 210. Between 210 and 220. But I'm 230 right now, so we're trying to get down there. But when you're heavier like that, or you're carrying extra weight, it does have a tendency to maybe prolong some injury. But I don't know if I think he was actually bigger, like in his Ring of Honor days, because like he got pretty jacked, if I'm remembering correctly.
Well, you would know, I do not recall to any great degree that.
Yeah, I think he was pretty big, and then he leaned out when him and Gargano were doing when they weren't under contract yet. Remember?
Sure.
And they were just part of
they would come in for appearances.
And they were trying to get their foot in the door and stuff like that. And he was really lean and really small then. And then I think once he realized, hey, I could get a push if I do this. The
emphasis that WWE places on that. Now, going back to the 80s and early 90s, that was something that was well known and resulted in some cases, some legal troubles, but we'll stay off that. We're staying in the last 10 years. I guess the examples I would give that always stood out to me is I'll start with Triple H. Now, Triple H very publicly and very openly made a big deal about his physical fitness routine. He emphasized it, and throughout his career, he had a tremendous physique. There's no, but he also had, I believe, was it 2 torn quads? There was a torn pectoral, I think a torn bicep or tricep. And I just wonder if maybe bulking up all those muscles the way he did.
Yeah, if you bulk up too quickly, that you tear muscles. But Tommaso's wasn't torn muscles.
Now he did have neck troubles, which obviously
the neck trouble was
that wouldn't have been related.
And I think that's more related to taking unnecessary head drops.
Sure.
For decades on end. You know what I mean? Like me personally, like I've not anything intentionally. I've never been dropped on my head. Like I don't take brain busters. I don't take anything that would do that. I want to land as flat as possible on everything. And here, I'm 40 years old. No major time off besides the heart surgery stuff. No major injuries. No major surgeries. Anything like that. So I mean, and here we are, Tommaso Ciampa. Who's probably wrestled maybe as many matches as me, maybe not. I don't know. I've wrestled about 3,500, so I don't know if, independent-wise, I'm pretty high on the list.
Sure.
So, I mean, someone that's maybe wrestled, let's say he wrestled 500 or 1,000 matches less than me, and yet he's had all these surgeries and all this time on the shelf and stuff like that. Wrestling is very, and this is like, what have you done for us lately? Out of sight, out of mind. If you're not on television or you're not in front of people, you might as well just be non-existent because they forget about you.
Out of sight, out of mind. Okay. Mentioning the Brain Buster to get my attention because last night I watched a match between Neville, a.k.a. the Blaster Pac, and the FTR member, whose new name, I want to make sure, is Dax Harwood now.
Yeah.
I want to try to avoid calling him the WWE name if I can.
Right.
But they had a match in which they did a super brain buster.
Right.
Which made me nervous just to watch. When I realized I thought it was just going to be a superplex. But then I said, oh, that's not what they're doing. It did make me nervous, and I almost felt like they were making a pay-per-view match out of a Rampage match, which I understand, but does cause me concern sometimes.
Right.
Back to the subject about body types. Now, the other body type I want to bring up, as far as being a pro wrestler, is going to be what I would consider the polar opposite of Triple H, and that would be Mick Foley. Mick Foley never throughout his career was viewed as a muscle man or, nothing like that. Was never, but he had a very long career and particularly when you consider the kinds of chances he took in the ring. Let me be honest, he took a lot of chances. Had a relatively low absence rate for injury. Is that fair for me to say from a viewpoint of a fan?
Yeah, from those types of injuries, yeah. And that's the thing we talked about time before is like wrestling used to be about, all the different sizes and all the different, gimmicks and, things like that. And now everyone's kind of like we talk about cookie cutter. They look like this. They have to have abs, this kind of look. And, it really does, in my opinion, it does like a disservice to a lot of them because there's just so much more that can be offered, as far as the way it goes. And another thing is like when you're a Triple H or you're a Rick Rude or you're a Buff Bagwell or if you're a Lex Luger, you're some, then you have to be in that kind of shape the rest of your life. Because the minute you show up to a show and you're not in that shape,
right,
that's when everyone's gonna blast you. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things like a lot of guys when they're young and they're 23, 24 years old, and it's easy for them to gain mass and look good and stuff like that. That I'm gonna call myself Buff Bagwell.
Well, yeah.
But then time goes on and you have a couple shoulder surgeries and things like that, and it gets tougher and tougher to maintain that physique.
Sure.
As we all get older. So, I mean...
And then calling yourself that name still, yeah.
Yeah. And the term body guy gets thrown around some, but, like, I think it gets used way too much. Body guys, in my opinion, are 6'4", 6'5", 270 pounds, huge biceps, just muscled up. That's a body guy to me. Now I'm seeing guys that are 180 pounds, but have abs and are kind of halfway ripped. talk
Right.
about how they're body guys. Like, no,
Yeah.
you're not a body guy.
Yeah, it has a whole different connotation. Maybe Jesse the Body. That would be an example. One of the big events for me that I'd like to speak on quickly here, as I see time's moving on us. It was WrestleMania 30. It was my first opportunity to attend a WrestleMania, and I thought it was really a successful WrestleMania, and one where it really felt like the fans kind of won on that one. And do you quickly want to give your thoughts overall on WrestleMania 30?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was in New Orleans. I was actually in New Orleans that weekend. We did a Mid South reunion show with with everybody. Bill Watts was there. Cornette was there. Everyone was there. And it was very successful. And I did not attend WrestleMania though. I drove back home I had the family with me, so the kids were young, so
Sure.
we drove back, and then I made it back in time to watch WrestleMania on the network. So yeah, WrestleMania 30 itself, yeah, like you said, was very successful, and like it was the culmination of a story, and like
Yeah.
we got to see Daniel Bryan,
Yes.
yes, and win, and blah blah blah, and
Yes-omania.
and then what happened?
Well, WWE reverted back to what WWE traditionally is.
Well, I mean, no, he had to.
Oh well, yeah, he had to give it up because of
Yeah.
he did have some injuries.
Yeah.
I shouldn't get down that rabbit hole. It's that is one of the subjects that frustrates me about WWE. Speaking of the things that frustrate me about WWE and WrestleMania 30, WrestleMania 30 saw the end of the streak.
That's a very big point. So
Well, I'm not going to forget that one. I have been traumatized.
I was literally like, I was on my phone just doing whatever during the match because I knew in my mind Undertaker was going to win. There's no way Lesnar's breaking the streak. There's nothing. And all of a sudden, I hear F5 and I hear 1, 2, 3, and I look up and everyone's like me. They're like, "What the?" And I tweeted out as soon as it happened. I said, "And now starts the most controversial finish in wrestling history," because now everyone's going to be second guessing and I halfway agree, and sometimes I don't agree. Like, yes, I wish it would have been like a Bray Wyatt or someone like that done it, that we could continue some kind of legacy. But at the same time, Lesnar is the next guy. You know what I mean? Like, he's the next draw. And like, if anyone's gonna have that spot, you know what I mean? Like Mick Foley said, "Your hero Mick Foley now."
Right.
Your hero Mick Foley. He said, if anyone's gonna have that spot, and anyone's gonna be able to handle that negative attention, then it's Brock Lesnar, because he does not give a shit what anyone else thinks.
Right, including about professional wrestling.
Right.
I firmly believe he could not care less about professional wrestling in general, its fans, or anyone else. I think if there's such a thing as a wrestling mercenary, I would say Brock Lesnar is that person.
I think he's grown to love it.
Ah, okay.
I really
You think
do.
he's mellowed in his old age?
Well, not mellow, but like I think he's really understood the value that professional wrestling's had on his life. Like when he was younger and stuff like that, and he came in and he got the push and all this, and he was burned out, and because he didn't like to travel anyway, and he has to go home because screw this stuff, and then he went to UFC, but he realized that all the stuff that he's accomplished in his life have pretty much been, on the back of his WWE fame. And he's made a shit ton of money doing it. And and this is of course dirt sheet talking. I don't know Brock Lesnar personally,
No.
but I mean, from what I understand, like he truly loves the business now. It may not seem like it to you, but like I really do think he's grown to love it.
I would like to think that's true.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe someday I'll be convinced of that. There's a couple of things I'd like to try to slip in. I know we're fast approaching the end. One I think I really want to get in when I look back over history is I want to say, well, CM Punk. I was thinking about the pipe bomb in particular and his departure from WWE.
The Summer of Punk.
The Summer of Punk.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge time. Very few guys in this business can genuinely say at any point in time that they were the hottest thing in professional wrestling. Who are we talking about? Ric Flair, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Ric Flair, and CM Punk. You know what I mean? Like he was undoubtedly the hottest thing in professional wrestling at that point.
Right.
And unfortunately, it in my opinion, it didn't capitalize the way it should have capitalized. Obviously, his loss to Triple H at that one pay-per-view diminished that tremendously.
Yes, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember the name of it.
I don't remember that, but it was Nash came out and power bombed him and allowed Triple H to get the win. And I mean, just when someone's hot like that, you just have to let them go.
Right.
Just let the steam build.
Right.
Strap the rocket to their ass and let it go and stuff like that. But
yeah, if it ain't broke,
don't fix it. Yeah, but and you have to, like I said before, wrestling's organic. The booking of it's supposed to be organic. So if the people love this guy, then let's not do anything for them not to love him. Let's keep going down this road and see what happens. And I think that was a huge missed opportunity. Obviously, he ended up being champion for 434 days, and he turned heel in the middle of that run to give himself a whole new life on the thing.
To kind of extend his character,
to extend the character and extend the title reign and things like that. But I still feel even with all that, it was still because even when he was at WrestleMania, he wasn't the main event.
No,
you know what I mean, and that would piss me off if I was the hottest thing in professional wrestling and I don't have that spot.
Well, my recollection is that routinely, everybody. I understand what John Cena was, but routinely John Cena was the main event. I look back, and I believe it was Survivor Series 10 years ago that I was looking at, where CM Punk became the WWE champion, but the main event was a tag team match involving John Cena and the Miz. I think that's when he was with R-Truth.
Versus The Rock.
Right, and The Rock. Yeah, The Rock. Cena and The Rock, that's going to be your main.
Yeah.
I understand, but there you have CM Punk become WWE champion, not the main. And then I guess we could kind of bring it forward in this 10 years, that 7-year absence that he talked about when he returned, coming back and the impact he made on the wrestling world when he did reemerge into professional wrestling. Do you have any particular comments you want? I know time is, I think we're over, aren't we?
Yeah, we're over a little bit.
Okay.
The Rock, I mean, The Rock's 7-year absence, unfortunately, was probably the best thing for his wrestling that could have happened. A lot of us say, oh, he left for 7 years. He should have been there. He should have done this. People don't understand, The Rock was, people give John Cena and Roman Reigns shit about being booed out of the building. The Rock was the original one that was booed out of the building.
Right.
As a babyface, as the top babyface in the company.
Was it Flex or Rocky Maivia?
Well, I mean, there was all kinds of. There was Rocky Maivia time. There was when he dropped the title to Lesnar.
Right.
They were 100% behind Lesnar and not Rock. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
The whole thing with him and Hogan at Mania.
Absolutely.
Where he wasn't the babyface in that situation because Canada hadn't seen Hogan in 10 years. So.
And they wanted the red and yellow Hogan.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what they demanded.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's what people don't understand. He was the first guy that had to deal with that. And but that 7-year absence kind of made everyone just forget that. And then he comes back and it's like, oh, the Rock,
most electrifying,
the most electrifying man in sports and entertainment, is back. And I think he's done a really good job on his return. He looks phenomenal. Obviously, he's still got the charisma. One thing I always credit The Rock with is when someone is verbally jabbing with him, he lets them jab. And that's a big thing. I can't stand to watch promos where two guys are just trying to shout each other down.
Right.
And you can't get anything over. But, when each one is allowed to make their points and react off each other and do things like that, that's the beauty of a promo. And The Rock is he knows how good he is on the stick, so he's going to let you say whatever you want to say, and then he's going to get you on his end. You know what I mean? And that's a true professional right there.
Right, because if the people can't hear you, neither one of you can communicate what you're trying to communicate.
Exactly. But anyway, we are over time, just a little bit, 34 minutes right now. But for myself, the Golden Boy Greg Anthony, and for my co-host, Money in the Bank, Mark Tipton, thank you and goodbye.